Welcome to Watch This Space. I'm NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine, and today we're going to visit the historic Launch Complex 39A, where we launched all of our moon missions and even some space shuttle missions. Today we have a very special guest, Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX. We are at the Kennedy Space Center at Launch Complex 39A, which is a very historic, I would say, not just launch complex, but a very historic monument for our country. From this launch complex, we launched all of our missions to the moon. We also launched space shuttles, and we have a really exciting event that's happening tonight, which is the reason why we're here, which is tonight we're going to launch with what we call Demo 1, which is a mission to the International Space Station with Crew Dragon. In other words, it's not crewed, but it is a test flight going all the way to the International Space Station. Now, where we are right now on Launch Complex 39A, we're on what we call the crew arm, which is the way the astronauts are actually going to get to the capsule so that they can fly to the International Space Station. Now, that's not going to happen tonight, but tonight we're going to test the vehicle, all components of the vehicle. And I am thrilled and honored to be here at this very historic site with Elon Musk, who has been an amazing partner for NASA for all of the years to get us to this point, where what we want to do this year is launch American astronauts on American rockets from American soil. And getting to this point, as you and I have talked, was not something that came easy. It's not something that came fast. But step by step, you have gotten us to the point where we're ready, almost, to take that next step. I'd like to start just by asking you, the story that is out there is that there was a time in your life when you made a trip to Russia, and your intent was actually to buy, I guess, an excess intercontinental ballistic missile.
Yeah, without the nuke.
Without the nuke, right? Yes. Without the nuke, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's extra.
Yeah, that's extra, right. So tell me about why you were there, and ultimately how it resulted in this moment right now.
Sure. Well, originally I was not going to start a rocket company. I really wanted us to become a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species. And I thought if there's something I could do to get the public excited about sending people to Mars and maybe having a permanent base on the moon, I wanted to do a philanthropic mission to send a small greenhouse to the surface of Mars, so you'd have this amazing shot of green plants on a red background. And I thought that would really inspire the public. And if the public got inspired about sending life to Mars, then they would tell their senators and congressmen to appropriate more money for NASA so that we could do that. So my initial goal was actually just to increase NASA's budget. And then what I found was that, first of all, the Russians really wanted to charge me way more than I could afford. They wanted to charge me more money than I had to do the philanthropic mission. And so that was not really being an option. And I thought, well, is there any way to make a lower cost and especially a reusable rocket system in the U.S.? And so I just read every book I possibly could on rocket engineering and decided to try giving it a go, essentially to give NASA more options, more sort of technology, like more technology horses in the stable, essentially, to use in order to get humanity into space and become a multi-planet species.
And you started with a much smaller rocket, the Falcon 1. And was your goal at that point, when you started with Falcon 1, to get to the point where we had 9 engines for Falcon 9? Was that your goal at that time?
When I started SpaceX, I only thought there was maybe a 10% chance of getting Falcon 1 to orbit. I did not at all think that this would happen. So this is for sure a dream come true. But I literally at the time I didn't know anything about rockets, and I've been the chief engineer of SpaceX since day one, and I don't really know anything about rockets, which is why the first 3 rockets failed.
Right.
And then.
So the first 3 Falcon 1s for SpaceX were failures.
Yes.
And then, tell me about the fourth one.
The fourth one, so I'd actually only had enough money for three flights. So I had no more money left, and we managed the team sort of rallied, and we managed to put together enough spare parts to do a 4th launch, and that 4th launch was successful. And And then
So what would have happened if it wasn't successful?
SpaceX would have died.
So we would not be here right now, at this moment, getting ready to launch Crew Dragon to the International
Yes.
System. Wow,
Yeah.
that's an amazing story of taking a risk and actually coming out on top and enabling not just you and SpaceX, but enabling the United States of America to come to this very critical point in American history.
Absolutely, and I'd just like to express a great appreciation for NASA and acknowledge the debt that SpaceX owes NASA in developing all of the rocket. The rocket technology that we built our rockets on was developed by NASA over many decades, and we without that, SpaceX would not have been possible. And then shortly after our first success, NASA gave us a critical contract to resupply the space station with cargo, and that was also fundamental to SpaceX's success. And without NASA support, SpaceX wouldn't be here. So thank you.
Well, it was long before my time, but
I'd just like to thank NASA.
yeah, thank the United States of America for supporting this really amazing
Absolutely.
opportunity.
Well, we have now learned the events surrounding Elon Musk's decision to start SpaceX. Let's meet some of the astronauts that will be launching on Commercial Crew.
Yes.
But that was in 2001 when all of that kind of started materializing and you started having these thoughts. I wanted to ask Victor, who's going to be one of our pilots of these crew vehicles, 2001.
2001.
Victor, where were you in 2001?
I was learning to fly jets,
Okay.
and I actually got my wings
Pretty great.
that year.
Cool.
So
That sounds awesome.
So Victor was a naval aviator, getting his wings. What month was that? 2001.
December 2001.
Okay, so you got yours about 5 months ahead of me. I was in May of 2001, but you obviously did much better than I did because I ended up running a museum and then becoming a politician, and you went on to become an astronaut.
I don't know if you can say that now, sir.
Yeah, so my job is much easier than yours. I can tell you that. Of course, we're so proud of all of our astronauts. You guys have all made your whole country proud. Bob, how about you? Can you remember maybe 2001 where you might have been at that time?
I can. Back in 2001, I was an astronaut candidate.
Okay.
I started in the office back in 2000 in the summer, July. So just getting my first chance to come down here to Kennedy and strap crews in. I was just getting started as a big crusader.
Yep.
One of the astronauts that operated the space shuttles before the crew came to strap in and collected them after they landed in the space shuttle. So.
And your background before that, you were an Air Force flight test engineer.
Correct. I'm an Air Force flight test engineer, still active duty in the Air Force. I worked the F-22 program after test pilot school, and then worked in a research lab at Elon Air Force Base prior to that.
So it's amazing to think about where everybody was at these different times and how it all comes together at this one moment. In 2019, we're gonna make it happen.
I never would have thought this would have happened. I would have given it less than a 1% chance.
Yeah, it is really amazing.
Yeah.
Doug, how about you in 2001?
Well, I'm a classmate of Bob, so
Okay.
we were selected in 2000 as astronauts, and so we were still astronaut candidates, just kind of learning our new trade. So kind of hard to believe you just got your wings. We were already astronauts by then, or at least almost astronauts. We were working towards being full-fledged astronauts. But yeah, it's amazing how far we've come in that short amount of time.
How about you, Mike?
2001, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, it was seriously a long time ago.
It is, yeah.
I can remember it well, but it was 18 years ago now.
18
Unreal.
years, yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
I'm a flight
They're
test
kidding
engineer as
college
well.
by now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Flight test engineer as well in the Air Force, and it was in Canada, Cold Lake, Alberta. I was on exchange at their flight test center testing the Canadian jets.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So right now, inside the Crew Dragon for tonight's launch is I don't want to call him or her a dummy.
I know. I was trying to avoid the use of the word dummy.
Tell me what we call the I guess synthetic person.
Anthropometric test article.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is it you decided to name the anthropometric test article?
I called her Ripley.
Ripley.
Ripley from Aliens.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It's a great character.
Yeah. One thing that SpaceX has done really well is capture the imagination of the American people through branding and really exciting things. Launching, for example, a Tesla, which is still in deep space, orbiting the sun.
Yeah, I mean that was a case where like normally we do first test flight of a rocket, normally like a block of concrete would be launched.
Right.
Because you don't want to launch anything valuable that could get destroyed on the initial flights. On the initial flight of Falcon Heavy, the team was originally going to launch a block of concrete. It's like, guys, it's hard to get the public excited about a block of concrete. Okay, it's just so like what's something like, you know, that's an image that's going to really stick in people's minds and resonate. And so it's like, okay, let's put a car in space. It doesn't make any sense, obviously. You can't drive a car in space. But at least it's convertible. Even though there's no air, it doesn't make any sense. But and then putting, I guess, an anthropomorphic test article in a spacesuit driving the car through space. And then you know, it's the kind of thing I think kids can get really excited about, and like, you know, so I think inspiring adults and kids and people of all ages to want to go out there and explore and become a multi-planet species and have a base on the moon and build a city on Mars and ultimately go to other star systems. We got to have inspiring images, things that really, you know, have a strong emotional effect, you know, and just like make you feel.
So Doug, tell me, tonight's test flight, what are some of the things that we're going to be looking for? What are, as somebody who's going to be on this, you know, the crewed flight, what are some of the things you're going to be looking for?
It's just kind of an end-to-end test for the system. So we just want to see the teams work through, all the way through to launch, ascent, then we've got to get the vehicle activated in orbit, then work our way through a rendezvous. And then we're trying to get out to Hawthorne actually to see the docking out there as well. And so obviously just seeing how the teams all work together and make this mission, you know, successful, and then all the way through to the splashdown. So I think we're just trying really hard just to see every bit of the system go through space.
So I like what you said, the words end to end. So all of the systems and all of the subsystems, they've all been tested over and over again.
I mean, so a lot of testing.
Yeah.
And I mean, this has really been a joint effort with NASA. This spacecraft would not be nearly as good as it is without the input from NASA. There's been a lot of NASA help here, and thank you for that.
Well, we're very grateful for what you're doing, helping us launch American astronauts from American soil once again. And of course, these gentlemen here are the beneficiaries of that. And I can only express the best that I can how proud all of America is with who you are and what you've done and what you represent. The entire world is going to see us launching again to the International Space Station. And this time when we do it, it's different. In fact, NASA is a customer. And as a customer, we become one of many that will be using this crew vehicle if all goes according to plan, and we'll have a robust commercial marketplace for spaceflight. And that commercial marketplace could be sovereign countries, it could be individuals that want to go maybe on vacation to space, which I know sounds crazy, but I'll tell you, and you know this, those folks are out there, and there's a lot of folks that are ready to do it. Of course, they have the same dreams and ambitions that all of you had when you were coming up, so it's an exciting time.
I think this is a good step. It really is getting people back in orbit.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it's a step towards, like, ultimately. I mean, what I really want to see is, you know, permanent base on the moon, permanently occupied human base on the moon, and us building a city on Mars. That's like, if I can see the beginning of that before I die, I'll die happy.
Well, the president's first space policy directive to me was go to the moon, and the word in there is sustainably. So how do we go? We don't want to recreate the Apollo program.
Exactly.
We don't want to leave flags and footprints and not go back. We want to go and we want to stay. And this time, that means landers, rovers, robots, and humans in a sustainable return. It doesn't mean at this point we're ready to have, as you mentioned, you know, a city on the moon. But what it means is we can put together all of the components that enable it to eventually be sustainable. And part of that is reusability. Tell me,
reusability is fundamental. If a fully reusable vehicle will cost 100 times less per flight than an expendable vehicle. And it kind of makes sense. If you think of any other mode of transport, it could be like you know, jet aircraft or cars, bicycles, horses, every other mode of transport, boats, they're all reusable. the weird one that isn't reusable is space.
That's right.
So you can imagine how expensive it would be if every time you flew in a jet that you had to get a new jet,
Right.
as opposed to refuel the jet. It would be insanely expensive to fly a jet if it was single use.
There wouldn't be anybody flying.
No, exactly. It would be like a few research flights at extreme expense, and that's all the flying that would occur. So the absolutely fundamental breakthrough that's needed is a fully reusable orbit class rocket and spaceship system, and it needs to be fully and rapidly reusable. So the cost of reuse must be very low, and it must be able to have a high flight rate.
Right.
And that's the fundamental breakthrough needed for humanity to become a multi-planet species.
And I think one of the key enablers there was a program we called Commercial Crew that went into place quite a while ago. And what the vision was that we would have multiple providers competing on cost and innovation. And of course, that has now taken effect. And as you are competing against others in this commercial marketplace,
Right.
you have a huge incentive to drive down the cost and increase the access to space. And that's materializing here on this Crew Dragon that we're going to see launched tonight.
Yeah, I actually don't care at all about money at all, but I do care about us becoming a space-faring civilization.
Yeah.
And I do know that if we don't achieve full and rapid reusability, it will not happen.
Yeah.
And so that's the only reason I actually want money at all.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, guys, thank you for being a part of this, and it's an exciting night.
Well, thank you for watching Watch This Space. I'm NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine. You can follow me on Twitter @Jim Bridenstine. And of course, if you want to watch this again, you can do so at nasa.gov/watchthisSpace.